Okay, well, we talked about in the rehearsal process of the 4 first levels.
Yes. And then the 5th is to begin working them in the layout of what the set will be.
Right.
But still letting them follow their own impulses to move, not trying to block it suddenly.
Right.
But letting it block itself.
Now, we're going to talk about that what I'm trying to get is, without really directing the people in the sense that most people talk about directing. You move here, say that louder, you pick up that cue quicker. No, you got to feel it here because they start explaining the play. You got to feel it. He feels it very deeply and all of this kind of business. You haven't really been doing any of those things that most people think of directing at all. What you've been doing are things that help them get to where they're going, where they will need to be on opening night and throughout the run, without taking them by the nose and pushing them there. All of those things are designed so that you will get responses from them that they would not otherwise give you when people, quote, work a scene, unquote, but doing it without the people even realizing it. And so everything in those first 4 steps is either to keep people from doing things which are harmful, and never forget, as I've said 1,000 times, the actor's dirty little secret. What he wants more than anything of you on earth is to impress people with his talent and his abilities. So in rehearsal, where he doesn't have an audience, the other actors are his audience. The director is his audience. Tries to perform for them too. So these things in these first 4 levels have been not giving him any opportunity to do that. So not only are you making a foundation about what should happen as each of these levels go, you're also keeping them from doing things which usually creep into the rehearsal process with other ways of doing it where people don't realize enough about the actor, enough about the actor's dirty little secret, and don't really pay attention to the problems that are caused by what you would call a conventional approach to starting rehearsals. And as I think I said before, what you really get of what we have done usually with most directors, take John Gielgud when he was directing Hamlet. I don't care who you want to pick. What you're going to get is, well, first of all, we read it through. Secondly, now we start to work it. And therefore, a lot of the things that you have the capacity to achieve in doing the 4-step process that I've been over have not been achieved at all. Now, we do get to the point which is, quote, directing, unquote. The 5th step, if you will, the 5th plateau, should be where you're starting to work scenes. Work parts of scenes, work acts.
Do you try to do those in chronological order, or depends?
I would always do it from the first of the play on, because I don't care what the play is, because everything that happens in a play is based on what happened previously. So if you start later anywhere in the play other than the first scene, how can they be there? Mm-hmm. How can anything be right? Mm-hmm. Be up in the air, but don't jump up there. How are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Right. So in movie making, if you had your druthers, you would shoot in chronological order.
Yeah. Now, sometimes
some movie directors have tried to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of them have tried to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we come to now the
5th.
In the 5th level.
The 5th level where you're putting
where
the
you're
set.
Starting to work. Now,
you're going to approximate the set with whatever you got kicking around.
Although you've only let them create their own blocking, and that blocking is only the characters in relation to each other. Mm-hmm. It's not in relation to a space. Mm-hmm. All the while when they're doing that, you know what the stage is going to look like, because you are supposed to have gotten what the stage is going to look like from the designer before you start rehearsals. Now, what people talk about often in mechanical blocking is to put people in certain places on the stage is better than putting them in other places on the stage. For instance, the quote hottest, unquote, space on stage is what?
Center stage.
Downstage center.
Yeah.
I'm right at the audience. I'm very center.
Yeah.
Upstage, far upstage, left or right would be the coldest places to put somebody.
Right.
So when your scene design is brought to you, you accept it or reject it based on whether the parts of the stage that I know what the events of the scene are have to happen. I don't want the point where the woman says to the man, yes, I have been having an affair with your brother. Actually, I love him. To be upstage right in the corner. You don't want that. So if you have a coffee table downstage center, you don't want that to be played standing on top of the coffee table. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So in other words, the set design has to do, like everything else, with the basic realities. Now, once you have accepted the set design, you have accepted it because you know the elements of the scene that have to be played can be played in that space. Now, you're in the fourth level, the time before. You're in the fourth level of the rehearsal period. You're letting them move about so that they're moving about with each other. In your own mind, you know, well, that's going to be downstage right. Mm-hmm. Because that's where I'm going to have her sitting, and so forth. Mm-hmm. So you watch them. As you watch them, it's not just to let them meander around to impulse, because you're judging their movements on impulse. And you'll say, oh, this one I'm going to underline and use, and that I'm not going to let him do. Come to the fifth time, I'm working the first scene, Act 1, Scene 1. And they're on an approximation of the actual stage. Now, before people enter, I tell them, when you come in, go sit over here. And the over there is because the first thing he's going to do is come in and kiss her. And I want the audience to see that. I don't want it center stage because it's not the crowning moment of the scene. It's only the beginning. So I want her down left, say. So that means that I have known this before. So that's where the couch is, going from down left on an angle towards center stage. Mm-hmm. Okay. When you come in, Betty, go sit on the far end of the couch. That's how you block her. That's just all she has to do is walk in. That's not the same thing as blocking, like walk 4 steps over there, turn and say your line. That's just where, when you enter, where do you go? Go sit down. Then the guy, you say you're coming in from the door. You've just been on the street. You found out something. You're coming to tell her, and you're very happy. So now, these are the elements of the scene, obviously. Mm-hmm. So now you come into the room and find her. Mm-hmm. And his impulse that came from section 4 to move to her now, he'll do. Mm-hmm. And he goes over and stands over her. You just say, you know, when you come in there, go in and sit by her. That's fine. If he doesn't do that. Now you're starting to block in the way that people generally think about blocking, which is putting the people in certain places on the stage so it will have the major impact of the audience.
Right. What about the question of entrances, where entrances are in the set design? I've heard it said before, you know, when you have key entrances in a certain place, let it be on the stage where an actor can make an entrance. In other words, you wouldn't want to put a key entrance, you know, right at the feet of the audience, downstage, extreme left.
Well, that
when people are coming in, they can't make a good entrance, or they have their, you know, they end up with their backs to the audience and so forth.
Yeah. One thing, don't think about good entrances. The actor's good entrance. That's a phony thing. That's, the actor's entering now.
Right.
He should be seen and appreciated by the audience. Mm-hmm. Throw that away.
Right.
But in the acceptance of the stage design, they say, well, we put the door to the apartment down left. Now, if nobody ever comes in or out significantly, it could be down there.
Yeah.
But if it does, you say, can't put it there.
That's what I mean, you know.
But that you do with designer. The actors have nothing to do with that. And so you make sure the design functions in a way that can allow you to see the things that are necessary. For instance, to be seen.
If you're directing a farce where you know it's door open, door closed, door open, the positioning of the doors is very important.
Right.
On the stage, yeah.
And by the way, the positioning of those doors is very important, just like where you have them sit in the semicircle chair. In other words, the two people who are going to be the husband and wife will be way over here and way over here. The husband and the lover will be the two right next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So they can get in and out and so forth. And then the wife comes in,
Mm-hmm.
and now she thought she heard somebody in the room. And then somebody else comes in who really loves the girl that the husband is having an affair with. He comes in the door between where the girl went off and where the wife comes in, if you have 4 doors. So again, it's done in relation to who is who to whom, mm-hmm. and what in the scene activity takes place. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's how you're starting to give them a sense of how to move in this space on stage. You know that certain things of the stage, certain areas of the stage are better than others, and that highlighted moments of the scene should happen in those places. So that's how you tell them, come in and sit here. And then the other person who moves in relation to them, the first person who comes in, by the way, is not in relation to anybody. So they got to be told where to go. Mm-hmm. The second person who comes in now is in relation to the first person, just like they were in the semicircle. Mm-hmm. So you let them go wherever they're going to go.
Yeah.
And all you say is, if they just come in the door and stand, you say, you're going to tell your lover from way across the room? You don't say, now walk to her, and all of that business. Right.
Yeah.
Now, what this is doing is keeping them in the dramatic reality.
Right, because if you say...
rather than making it a stage
if you say
movement.
You're going to say to your lover, away from the door over there, they're in the situation, rather than walk over here.
Exactly.
Then they're an actor, right?
Right,
and
then they're actor doing their blocking, which you don't want to do.
Yeah, you don't want their psyche in that. You want their psyche in the character psyche.
Okay, so now that should show you how to deal with blocking on putting the people in where you want them to be once now you're actually working the scene, not doing the first 4 levels that we've talked about. Now, other than that, what do you do in that? Because obviously it's not a blocking rehearsal. So what is the main thing that you're trying to do when you start, quote, working a scene?
Well, you should be beyond, for the most part, the dramatic meaning, right, by this point, so that should be there.
What does it mean by working the scene? What are you working?
Well...
in other words, sometimes directors take this approach.
Yeah.
Okay, let's begin scene 1, and they sit back, and if things go kind of like they wanted to, they say, well, fine, okay, do a little of this quicker, move over there a little faster. When you're saying that line, make sure you're looking at her, or other those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. All that's almost useless. All that kind of thing is almost useless. It's like coming into a filthy room and trying to tidy it up with a duster. You have to come in with a big, heavy equipment, vacuum and everything, get everything out of there, and finally at the end, you dust the furniture to get the dust off. And then you vacuum again, by the way, because the dust now goes onto the floor, so you vacuum it up.
Well, are you making sure that they are... you want to make sure they're in the mindset of the character, that they're in the proper... that now body is now connected to brain in a sense.
Mindset of the character or mindset of the situation?
The situation. In other words, that they are...
What differentiation did I just make?
Well, it's not just the character separate from the situation. We are always responding not just to who we are, but to what events we are dealing with, right? So you can't just say, well, the character would do this. Well, under this, you got to look under this circumstance, right? The character's responding to
the main thing of any dramatic presentation, Aristotle says, is what?
The story, the
fable, what he
event,
calls the fable.
The event.
The event.
Right? Yeah. That's the main thing.
So that's what has to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing when you're starting to, quote, work it, is to make sure that the basic event is starting to happen. And that's not just being aware that they're saying the lines as they mean it. Rather, it is that they are in a situation that they are prompted now to speak with these lines. So it's not lines related. If they don't say anything, they have to come in and be themselves in the situation first. So that's what you have to work for. Now, we talked about before, there's a difference between situation and character.
Right.
If they are a character that is significantly different from themselves, when do they start working on the character?
Immediately.
What do you mean immediately?
As soon as they start working on the part, right? They should, if they're playing a character different from themselves, they should start to work on that character.
And
as soon as they start to work on the
we're
piece.
in the 5th level or the 5th plateau of the process. Is that where they should start now working on the character?
No.
Where should they?
On the second, because in the first they're reading somebody else's role.
Right.
Yeah, on the second.
Yeah. So already that night, as they're going through, you're really working on the lines. But you'll say to them, "Oh, wait a minute. Aren't you playing somebody who's older than you now?
Mm-hmm.
And does he talk just like you talk?" You just remind them of that earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't stop what you're doing.
Right.
You don't say, this is as important as you're understanding how the lines work dramatically.
Right.
But you
give
them a little nudge.
And
say,
you don't expect...
Oh, wait. And
you don't expect the full characterization.
No, of course not. No.
At that point.
No.
If you're casting a...
But you don't let them read it as themselves.
Right. If you're casting a 25-year-old guy and you know he's got to play... For whatever reason you would do this, I don't know. But he's got to play a 62-year-old man.
Right.
You don't expect the characterization to be perfect it's never perfect, but in the first. But you want him to begin to work on it.
Yeah. So that already now you say, well, is that how the character speaks? You're doing an Irish play. You're doing even Moon for the Misbegotten, where the father is Irish immigrant. You let him just talk like Jim? No, he's got to start to talk with the lilt and everything else. It's not now that the rehearsal changes from a line-by-line understanding of the dramatic reality.
That's the same.
That's
the
most important thing.
Whether he has an Irish accent or not.
But you do in that time start to say, well, wait a second, this is not what we're really after tonight, but just to put in your mind and everybody's mind and so forth, it's not just you. It's not just your voice. So that by the 3rd time, when you're now reading through to make sure that the dramatic realities are connected to the lines, that what you did in the 2nd period of rehearsals took, you also watch now for a little bit more of the characterization, and certainly not allowing them to just drop any concern with that. Now, also, I don't want to belabor this too much now. We should talk about this singly at some point. But everybody assumes, Hamlet? That's me. Rosencrantz? That's me. Polonius? That's me. I could play that.
Yeah, didn't Shakespeare have that in mind when he wrote it? You?
So, actually, everybody is playing character. Always.
Every time.
If you're a lawyer, you behave differently from somebody who's not a lawyer. How? That person has to study, find out what a lawyer does that's different from just other people. Lee used this example in class. He says, if you're at a dinner party and a guy who is a dentist is there with his wife, and a couple comes up and says, hi, Mrs. So-and-so and Dr. So-and-so. This is, the two women know each other from the PTA or whatever the hell else. And this is my husband, Jack. He sells cars. Oh, hi, Jack. Nice to meet you, and so forth. They walk away. The dentist looks at his wife and says, that man has an overbite. He never stops being a dentist, in other words. Even when he's there, he notices that because that's his profession. When we have a profession, we are tuned to that profession. An acting teacher watches other people's behavior, if they're an acting teacher who deals with behavior instead of bullshit acting. That person, it's harder to lie to because they see it all the time. What an actor's doing when they're doing phony acting is just lying. I'm not who I am supposed to be. I'm not going through what I'm supposed to be doing, so I'm going to pretend that I am and try to give you the sense. That's exactly what a liar does in life. So, without trying to, you see people coming up 6th Avenue with their bullshit if you're an acting teacher who works with behavior. If you are a banker and people come in wearing a certain kind of suit, you know, this guy's got money. I wonder where he's got his investments. Now, what that means is that every character is a character.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just you. So early on, you don't, in that second read through, you make sure that they understand that the dinner that we're having now is, what do these lines mean from the situation? What do they mean dramatically? But it's a little kind of side dish. You'll say, well, you know, that character is such and such, so, you know, got to be working on it because you can't just talk like you talk, or you can't sit like you sit.
I mean, would you say that the first consideration, or maybe they're just simultaneous, first consideration is looking just purely at the situation. The second consideration now is, okay, but this character in this situation.
Yeah.
I mean, is it okay, do you think, to look at it as a step one, step two, or just look at it as a simultaneous thing, character and situation?
Yeah, I would just do it simultaneously, because here we don't want them to get any sense that I'm really about, this is about rehearsal about your character. But I mention it. Now, the third series, the third step, the third plateau in the thing, where they're coming in now and you want to see if they retain the other thing, you want to see that there's a difference in character as they're starting to play it now.
Okay. You mean in the third one?
Right.
Where you want to see if they've retained what you've done in
the second.
phase two.
In phase two, you have brought them to learn what these lines mean in the play.
Yeah.
You've kind of mentioned offhandedly that, you know, it's not just you, it's the character when there's a particular character difference. But what I'm really talking about now is that you've cast people for the characters. You don't cast them against character.
No.
You've cast them, as we talked about casting, for the essence inside first and all that business. And you paid attention to age and things like that. But people don't pay attention to how does this person behave in ways that's not just how everybody behaves. A psychologist looks at people differently than somebody who's not a psychologist. An analyst listens to everything you say, not for a word of what you say, but your tone and your voice and all of that business.
Right.
Well, let me just finish quickly. In this fifth session, when you're starting working on the scene, you want the character there, and now the working on the scene is that as we work on the scene, what we're working on is the situation. Are you the person? Do you mean the things now? And in addition, just as a slight thing, when you come in, sit on the end of the couch downstage, so forth. The guy comes in and stands there, you can say, you can sit.
So is the event happening? Is the situation
happening? The whole thing is about, are you the person in the event?
So it's character plus situation. Is it happening?
And is it not?
And is it not?
And so the person comes in, and it's very important that he's just almost been killed. He comes in the door and says, hi, John. And say, whoa. Weren't you just almost killed? What are you going to do for that? You got to come in with that sense.
Because now you're really looking at behavior beyond what you've done in the four stages, right?
Right.
Yeah. Because obviously...
that's why I mean you're now working the scene.
Right.
But you're not working the scene as a place of telling them where to move on the stage. You're not working in the scene as if making sure they read all the lines in a way that's the best way. You're not working on the scene in relation to their interplay with each other. You're not working in the scene with a million things that you could be working on. They're not speaking up enough. All of these kinds of things. One of the points I want to make, and we'll make this strongly next time, is that each rehearsal period, you're working with different things. You don't try to solve all of the problems. They'll be doing things, you know, he'll be moving somewhere. I'm not going to let him do that. But I don't give him that note in this first work through, because what I'm wanting, whatever happens, I want him to be the character in the situation. And so that's what I give notes on. That's what I work with. I don't give them all kinds of other notes for all the other things that they're doing wrong. I don't tell them, you know, get more familiar with the script so that you don't have to look down so much all the time. I don't tell them all the kinds of things that you don't want but are not to be addressed now. Because it's extremely important in the working through period what you address when. Because when you get the people involved with little things that are not so important, they're very important as polishing things at the end of the sculpture. They're not important now. It makes no difference if you got an extra little lump there when you're still working with the chisel.
Right.
You take off those lumps with the polishing later. You leave it now.
Right.
You don't say, I don't notice that there's a bump there.
Right.
You say, I noticed that, but we'll get to that later.
Right.
So that's the main thing. Once you start working here, and the reason I took the time about character is you got to make sure that now we're actually getting to the meat of working the play, the rehearsal period, which is you come in the door, you have just been told you're going to die in 6 months, and you are a 28-year-old baseball player, because that's what has to come in the door. Anything else makes no difference. Don't come in.
Right. So stage 5, the event.
It's totally the character in the event.
In the event, yeah.
But only the basic realities of the event, not all the other things. Who am I? What am I doing? And everything that I'm doing now has to be part of that. And if it's not, that's what I work on.